everybody. Story time with Mrs. Clark. In honor of the crazy weather we're scheduled to get tonight into tomorrow, snow in April, I'm going to read Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. And we have our farm stories up for next week. We are going to be talking about the farm starting on Monday, so get ready. All about all things that we do on the farm. We have lots of activities planned, and I can't wait for us to all make butter on Thursday. So I'm reading this story with permission from Scholastic Inc. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs by Judy Barrett, and pictures drawn by Ron Barrett. We were all sitting around the big kitchen table. It was Saturday morning, pancake morning. Mom was squeezing oranges for juice. Henry and I were betting on how many pancakes we could each eat, and Grandpa was doing the flipping. Seconds later, something flew through the air, headed toward the kitchen ceiling, and landed right on Henry. After we realized that the flying object was only a pancake, we all laughed, even Grandpa. Breakfast continued quite uneventfully. All the other pancakes landed in the pan, and all of them were eaten, even the one that landed on Henry. That night, touched off by the pancake incident at breakfast, Grandpa told us the best tall tale bedtime story he'd ever told. Across an ocean, over lots of huge bumpy mountains, across 3 hot deserts, and 1 smaller ocean, there lay the tiny town of Chew and Swallow. In most ways, it was much like any other tiny town. It had a main street lined with stores, houses with trees and gardens around them, a schoolhouse, about 300 people, and some assorted cats and dogs. But there were no food stores in the town of Chew and Swallow. They didn't need any. The sky supplied all the food they could possibly want. The only thing that was really different about Chew and Swallow was its weather. It came 3 times a day, at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Everything that anyone ate came from the sky. Whatever the weather served, that's what they ate. But it never rained rain, and it never snowed snow. It never blew just wind. It rained things like soup and juice, and snowed mashed potatoes and green peas, and sometimes the wind blew in storms of hamburgers. Wow. The people could watch the weather report on television in the morning, and they would even hear a prediction for the next day's food. When the townspeople went outside, they carried their plates, cups, glasses, forks, spoons, knives, and napkins with them. That way, they would always be prepared for any kind of weather. If there were leftovers, and there usually were, the people took them home and put them in the refrigerators in case they got hungry between meals. The menu varied. By the time they woke up in the morning, breakfast was coming down. After a brief shower of orange juice, low clouds of sunny-side-up eggs moved in, followed by pieces of toast. Butter and jelly sprinkled down for the toast, and most of the time, it rained milk afterwards. For lunch one day, frankfurters, already in their rolls, blew in from the northwest at about 5 miles an hour. There were mustard clouds nearby, and the wind shifted to the east and brought in baked beans. A drizzle of soda finished off the meal. Dinner one night consisted of lamb chops, becoming heavy at times with occasional ketchup. Periods of peas and baked potatoes were followed by gradual clearing, with a wonderful jello setting in the west. The sanitation department of Chew and Swallow had a rather unusual job for sanitation. It had to remove the food that fell on the houses and sidewalks and lawns, and the workers cleaned up after every meal and fed the dogs and cats. Then they emptied some of it into the surrounding ocean for the fish and turtles and whales to eat. The rest of the food was put back into the earth so that the soil could be richer for people's flower gardens. Life for the townspeople was delicious until the weather took a turn for the worse. Spaghetti ties up town. One day, there was nothing but gorgonzola cheese all day long. The next day, there was only broccoli all overcooked. And the next day, there were Brussels sprouts and peanut butter with mayonnaise. Another day, there was pea soup fog. No one could see where they were going, and they could barely find the rest of the meal that got stuck in the heavy fog. The food was getting larger and larger, and so were the portions. The people were getting frightened. Violent storms blew up frequently. Awful things were happening. One Tuesday, there was a hurricane of bread and rolls all day long into the night. And there were soft rolls and hard rolls, and some with seeds and some without. There was white bread and rye and whole wheat toast. Most of it was larger than anyone had ever seen before. It was terrible. Everyone had to stay indoors. Roofs were damaged, and the sanitation department was beside itself. The mess took the workers 4 days to clean up, and the sea was full of floating rolls. To help out, the people piled up as much bread as they could in their backyards, and the birds picked at it bit by bit, but it just stayed there, and it got staler and staler. Then there was a storm of pancakes one morning and a downpouring of syrup that nearly flooded the town. A huge pancake covered the school. No one could get it off because of the weight, so they had to close school. Instead of a snow day, I guess they had a pancake day. Lunch one day brought 15-inch drifts of cream cheese and jelly sandwiches. Everyone ate themselves sick at the day, and they ended it with a stomach ache. There was an awful salt and pepper wind accompanied by an even worse tomato tornado. People were sneezing themselves silly and running to avoid the tomatoes. The town was a mess. There were seeds and pulp everywhere. The sanitation department gave up. The job was just too big. Everyone feared for their lives. They couldn't go outside most of the time, and many of the houses had been badly damaged by giant meatballs. Stores were boarded up, and there was no more school for the children. So a decision was made to abandon the town of Chew and Swallow. It was a matter of survival. The people glued together pieces of stale bread and sandwich style with peanut butter, took the absolute necessities with them, and set sail on their rafts for a new land. After being afloat for a week, they finally reached a small coastal town which welcomed them. The bread had held up surprisingly well enough for them to build temporary houses out of it for them. The children began school again, and the adults tried to find places for themselves in the new land. The biggest change was that they had to get used to buying food at the supermarket. They found it odd that the food was kept on shelves, packaged in boxes, cans, and bottles. Meat that had to be cooked was kept in large refrigerators. Nothing came down from the sky except rain and snow. The clouds above their heads were not made of fried eggs. No one ever got hit by a hamburger again. And nobody dared go back to Chew and Swallow to find out what happened to it. They were too afraid. Henry and I were awake until the very end of Grandpa's story. I remember his kiss goodnight. I think that's the end. Yep, the end. All right, thanks for sharing Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs with me today. I know it was a longer story, but I hope you guys have a great weekend, and we will see you on Monday for the start of Farm Week. Have a great weekend, guys. Bye.